In this episode, I sit down with Jason Murray, the founder of Ares Armaments Australia, one of the few sovereign manufacturers of specialist munitions here in Australia. We talk about his journey, what drove him to take on the challenge of building sovereign capability, the hurdles he faced in the early days, and why this work matters so much in the Indo-Pacific today. Jason also shares how Ares is innovating with products like the Rooster anti-drone ammunition, their approach to partnerships and workforce development, and the role they're playing in strengthening Australia's defence ecosystem, from regional manufacturing through to national security strategy. It's a conversation about innovation, resilience, and the future of sovereign capability. Let's get into it. Jason, before we get into Ares itself, I'd love to hear a lot more about you and your motivation for starting Ares. Could you share a bit about your own background and career before founding the company?
Yeah, sure, Todd. So, my last 30 years in the world of work has been really a combination of management consulting, building, leading, and then selling professional services firms, ex-Big Four as well. So I've seen both ends of the business scale. And then over about the last 7 years, I moved very heavily into defence commercialisation. Did a spell state government, a spell federal on some of the defence advisory programs. And my motivation for getting involved with Ares and the founders and the team was very much a realization, like many others probably, that we just did not and still don't have the volume of small arms munitions and the I suppose less sexy end of guided readiness explosive ordnance, which is ammunition. And I started to look around and realize that 100% of any non-standard ammunition coming into Australia is imported. We don't make anything here that is non-standard. We've got amazing companies like Thales Australia making huge volumes of standard ammunition. But if the police or DAPL units are looking for something that is slightly outside of the norm in a different calibre, or a different nature, glass breakers, barrier breakers, something mission specific, then everything's imported. So I started to think, well, it's probably about time that somebody really started to put a shoulder behind this. And ever since we've had the company going in the last 12 months, we hear a lot about people, a lot of commentary. People say, how did you know? And you kind of think, well, how did you not know, especially if you were in the industry, that this was going to be of critical importance? So I often think, being in small business, you can do a lot of different industries. The defense industry is not an easy industry. So most of the people in it are in it for more of a cause, more of a personal passion. And certainly that's the case with me. I jump out of bed every day, feeling part and parcel of being able to defend Australia.
Oh, that's wonderful, mate. It's very, very noble of you too. And you've highlighted quite a number of challenges there that you're obviously trying to solve. Australia as a market's rather small. As you said, we've never really looked at why we should be manufacturing the type of products you're manufacturing here in Australia, let alone getting, I guess, federal and state governments to support that as well, can also be challenging. And I guess where we're located as a market at the bottom of the world, the cost of exports also probably a bit of a challenge. But with those problems and starting Ares, was there a specific moment or event where you actually said, we need sovereign capability like this, and you could be the one to build it? Was there anything in particular that went, yep?
Great question. And probably the resurgence of the Ukraine and Russian conflict was very much a trigger. Primarily around, even in the early days, you could just see the volumes of munitions being consumed was a shock to people. And then second point was how everyone started to address the tactical implications and the new challenges of drone warfare. Cheap, affordable, difficult to combat. And I had a moment where it registered with me very much the same as World War One fighter pilots when they first started to fly their biplanes and they had no weapons attached to the airframes and they were just shooting at each other with revolvers. And that seemed to me to be very much the opening sort of moment of the industrialized drone warfare we were seeing back in the early stage of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And then, of course, you fast forward to the end of World War One, and you had interrupter gears firing machine guns spaced through propellers without shooting the propeller off. So the advancements were huge. And we've now fast forward 3 or 4 years, we've seen exactly that. And so the counter-UAS piece was something from an early point within the genesis of Ares that certainly from a personal perspective, I found to be something quite fascinating and also worrying, realizing there were no real sort of answers to it. And every day at the moment with counter UAS, there's always a new way, a new layer. So those were really sort of the moments when I thought we really do need this assistance. The second point was speaking to and looking at tactical policing, general duties, policing requirements, and finding that many, if not all, of the state agencies could train more if they had access to more affordable training munitions. And so the second trigger for Ares was very much around looking at value and taxpayers, hard-earned funding, and also public safety. So those were two very quite distinct markets, but very much a case of they meet in the middle. And then if you overlay the top of that with just the sheer horrific costs of international freight to bring munitions in, typically you're spending 3 times in freight than what you just spent on the actual product you're acquiring.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's, I guess, unfortunately, stuck down at the bottom of the world, and shipping's extremely expensive, let alone munitions, right? But again, some wonderful causes there or problems you're trying to solve too. And it's not all just about defence, but as you mentioned, it's around public safety agencies, and we all know that the pressure that state budgets are under, and um, and how much our the good men and women of our policing services need better training, but need better equipment. It's pretty hard to balance the books, though, I guess, from those state government perspectives. But mate, that's a wonderful feat. And tell me, you founding a defence manufacturing company, like, that is no small feat. Yeah, where were the biggest hurdles in those early days?
Well, I'd say we're still in early days, and so every day is a hurdle. Where you literally have to pull on your big boy, big girl pants every morning and get ready to get hit around the head because you just never know what's coming, and it's never easy because you've got compliance, licensing, governance, insurance, bureaucracy, state level, federal. Then you've got your international import-export issues and logistics. So I think on average, only 10% of every daily effort goes into manufacturing the munition, and then everything else goes into the commercial compliance aspects of running the business. It's an incredibly challenging industry because of the length of time that the industry operates on. So orders, typically maybe for a police agency, they might make an order and then 18 months later get the product. I've heard plenty of instances where armourers have been transferred and the new armourer doesn't know that a major order is coming in, and then it's like a Christmas surprise. 18 months, 2 years later, something arrives. So it's very, very difficult as a small business to manage supply chain expectations, cash flow. There's plenty of other easier industries to make money in. This one must be some sort of a calling or penance. I'm not quite sure yet.
Well, it's like you said, defence. You got one client in defence. You got a couple of clients in policing agencies here in Australia. Tell me, do you know, Jason? You mentioned a whole lot of regulatory and compliance issues, supply chain issues. Are they faced by, I guess, competitors or similar businesses overseas that you know about, or do governments make it a bit easier for them to do business in those jurisdictions?
Well, I'd like to say it's just the grass is greener type of view, but every time I look outside of Australia, it seems an awful lot easier. Um, Even to the extent that the private equity market, banking systems in Australia, people might say at the outset they support defence and defence industry, but as soon as you mention lethality, you sort of, you get the smelling salts under the nose type of look. Um, I've even had a reaction from one very senior naval officer when he found out we were in the dirty business of small arms ammunition, and he literally said, "Oh, how ghastly!" He couldn't let it. He couldn't sort of contain it. So there's plenty of different views as much as there is different levels of bureaucracy. You'd have to say, as we've seen most recently with one Australian company proving the point, um, the US has to be the easiest location to start up a munitions business, um, and anything in lethality as well. Just from the sheer volume of the market, the speed at which the bureaucracy per state can support. And then you've got the defense, for instance, DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, is an awful lot of greater support in the angel investment space in defense and munitions than there is in Australia. So, yes, that was a very long answer. So the long and the short of it is Australia is a very difficult location to start up a munitions business.
Especially when you look at, the ADF at the moment, having to reduce their spend with existing contractors by 28% just to get to try and balance the books again.
Yes.
And that's difficult, because obviously that pressure then just gets put back on the suppliers. And there's a thing that I guess a lot of governments, well, at least in this country, don't fully understand, and that's a thing called profit, which which you need as a business to keep supplying. So it's a tough one, mate. That's a tough one.
Certainly is. But
Yeah.
I think longevity and just staying in and proving that you can deliver is the key, which is difficult as a small business. You try and go as fast as you can, but um, the bureaucratic hurdles are a massive impediment.
Yeah, yeah, and also I guess it could be seen as a key discriminator once you jump through those, right? So you're then a trusted partner. You've been through the pain, but you'd hope that you get rewarded by that from the people that buy the product. But yeah, they're challenges that a lot of people, as you say, especially in the defence industry, have to face. It's not for the light-hearted. So I congratulate you on what you're doing, Jason. I want to talk a bit more about the strategic and sovereign capability of Ares. Yeah, you're one of the few sovereign manufacturers of specialist munitions here in Australia. So, why is that capability so important right now in the Indo-Pacific context?
Multiple reasons from perspective of supply chain resilience. As much as we try and manufacture munitions with as many likely sourced components as we can, at the moment it's impossible to do that 100%. We don't make primers, small arms ammunition primers in Australia. We have single source of propellant manufacture, very limited case manufacturing. So projectiles wise, yes, the myriad of different types of projectiles that every particular client seeks is range from blaze turn to bonded to specialist applications. So yes, we can manufacture some of those locally, um, but the real issue around, I think, supply chain and why it's so important at the moment is, should we be cut off, then we've only got a certain amount of raw materials left to manufacture non-standard. Um, the fact that we are small and agile means that we can change around our production lines to accommodate much smaller MOQs, where large organizations simply can't. It's not a negative, but if a prime contractor is set up to make 5 million uh, rounds per week of a certain caliber, it's very difficult for them to change that run around. So I think having that level of flexibility at the moment with a small provider is going to be particularly useful. Things are calming down globally, as far as we can see. I mean, it looks particularly um, contested as different countries look to increase their defense spending. And of course, one of the big areas is munitions. I don't know anyone in the world who's ever said, oh, goodness, we've got too much ammo. But there's plenty of people at the moment identifying they haven't got enough, and that's an issue. And so, of course, NATO and Europe are a big drain, but US is huge in their production cycle as well. And you mentioned it before, Todd, we're at the other end of the world, and we kind of have to make sure that we can look after ourselves.
And yeah, in the region down here as well, you're right. And it's interesting, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but especially after the first year of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the US had run out of 155 shells. We don't manufacture enough here. Obviously, the good folk at NIA and up in Maryborough, their forging plant are trying as hard as they can, but they just can't keep up. And so there's such a short supply. And as you know, you mentioned some real key elements there is the supply chain. If manufacturers in the US or Europe or elsewhere, they're going to look after the US or European clients first, right? Before anything gets sent down here. So it's imperative, right, that the people like yourself can build sovereign supply chains, to ensure that Australia and our allies have enough of this incredibly important input into national security.
Completely agree, and I think we have to develop very much a collaboration, sort of wartime collaboration mindset. So we approach the market with the view that we're 100% happy to collaborate with all partners. Therefore, there are no competitors because we know what we do well, and we can support in with other larger, more established munitions providers. And I think that's probably quite unique in the defence industry here.
Mate, tell me, how does Ares fit into Australia's broader national security and defence industry strategies?
Well, from our perspective, we're highly supportive of obviously the state and territory police forces, both general duties and special tasks and the tactical teams. And certainly that's been our pedigree from zero. We're very keen to further support Defence Force with locally acquired munitions for especially specialist calibers. So from our perspective, we're putting our hand up to say we're here and we're ready to support. Strategically, there is an intent to supply the US DoD, US Marine Corps in the Northern Territory and FNQ. It's public knowledge that there is likely to be an increase in volume of assets from the US. And so at the moment, if the munitions for those forces have to travel 10,000 miles from Picatinny us, it seems to make sense if we could manufacture them locally and put them on the train network up to Darwin.
Yeah, well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? It's a matter, I guess, of getting that product to market as well, right? And having those buyers ready to go. But as you said, that it's that value and supply chain to make sure that you've got the right support in the right places to do these things. So that's a big effort. Well done. Mate, I wanted to move a bit into innovation and product development. You've got some really exciting things on the boil, and one that piques my interest is your Rooster anti-drone ammunition product. This converts existing small arms into counter-UAS systems. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. So we're very lucky with our R&D team. They're particularly talented and voracious in how they go after new challenges. And so over the last 12 months, we have had numerous conversations with remote weapon station RWS providers looking at trying to solve the ultimate magic bullet solution, which is a small arms caliber munition that has a greater terminal effect on a drone, certainly a Type 1 small, cheap drone. But when that projectile, when that bullet comes back down to earth, it has a less lethal effect because at the moment there are some fantastic RWS platforms out there like EOS Defense, that are particularly accurate, and they can take down drones at distance using some standard ammunition, but typically takes quite a few rounds because your typical F4 ball ammunition might go straight through an airframe. If it hits something critical, great. But if you are using maybe 10 rounds rather than 2, that's a factor. And then, of course, those rounds have to come down somewhere. So if you're trying to defend an urban area, civilians, or critical infrastructure, what goes up must come down, and it's going to have a lethal effect. So we were asked to uh, pull the rabbit out of the hat with a greater level terminal effect on drones, but a less lethal effect to civilians and personnel on the ground. So we set about a 12-month exercise. Myself and the team got very used to people saying, that's impossible, you'll never do it. And certainly we've seen all different types of other solutions popping up that haven't quite worked. And so we've created a physics solution to this particular problem.
Wow. And mate, why the name the Rooster?
So the team are very, very enamored with the background and relationship with Greek mythology, and they found out that roosters were highly acclaimed by Ares warriors after particularly successful battles. So the name just stuck, and then obviously with our Australian heritage, rooster seemed to just fit. And it's not gone away, and so far everyone in the market really likes it. People have come out with different songs and whatever. There's a couple of different theme tunes out there that people are putting to it. So it's taking on a life of its own.
That's fantastic. And mate, interestingly, yeah, the name Ares, obviously, I thought it was about the Greek god of war, but you mentioned something else in a note to me earlier. It's more about when things go sideways in war. Is that right?
Yeah, there's quite a few of the what do you call it? The old classics where there's reference to Ares, but specifically Ares embodies the spirit of battle when things aren't going really to plan. How you sort of dig in and keep going, and we thought at the time that was quite useful because we found ourselves in not a particularly rosy place with munitions being plentiful in Australia and for our Indo-Pac allies. So yeah, it seems to fit.
That's wonderful. That's another touch of the Australian sense of humour, as you mentioned earlier. Fantastic. Jason, tell me, what's your approach to balancing innovation speed with the rigors of testing, certification, demands of defence products, especially here in Australia? I mean, you mentioned some commercial and governance issues earlier, but what about the actual product when it comes to building these solutions?
Great question. So I don't think there is any balance. Our approach has been to take on the development that we know we can achieve ourselves. So we raced through to TRL6 and successfully completed proofing for Rooster on TRL6. And this is the same view with a number of our new products that we're bringing to market. But then as you bog down, and I'm sure people listening will understand the TRL levels, but test readiness level 7, as we get into that, tends to be where things bog down. And so we're going through phase 1 of a 5-phase TRL7 development, and that's when government, state, federal, and/or the market really needs to lean in, especially for small companies, because you can have the best product in the world, but it really does need that boost to get through. So I'm not sure what the perfect secret sauce looks like for TRL, sorry, for balancing speed to market. And so I think at the moment it's a massive challenge to try and address within innovation inside of defense, because defense categorically does not like risk. A risky business is one that's only been in business for 5 or 6 years and it's got a 50 million turnover. So, when you look at tiny startups that have got groundbreaking products, there's just no functionality. There's no framework to support that. So the risk has to come back to industry. Typically, the defense industry, I believe, is characterized by 99 times the response of no, because if you say yes, you're on the hook for the risk to actually create the solution. And so that's the environment we find ourselves in. So you really do need a huge amount of passion and belief in team and product to be able to bring something to fruition. Certainly from a Rooster perspective, we're right in the crux of getting the product up and the product out. Something that's at the back of all of our minds at the moment is how long have we got? And I'm not talking from a business perspective. I'm talking very much from a geopolitical perspective. Do we have 12 months? Do we have 18 months? So being the type of company we are very motivated much more from a sovereign capability and defense perspective than we are price, because we know that'll come eventually. So there's a real push with Rooster for us to be able to collaborate and do whatever we can to be able to get the product out, get it to the Australian Defence Force, get it to the tactical police teams as well, because this is particularly useful product for defending critical infrastructure. You could say that could be applied directly to certain naval assets coming into certain ports to defend against surveillance drones or, at the worst case scenario, drone attacks. So we're conscious of how do we get it out as fast as we possibly can. So that's something that's constantly driving us, not just from a tactical perspective, but from a commercialization perspective. So we are promoting it up with obviously Commonwealth, but also looking at state support from some of the programs that are available.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's a tough balance, isn't it, mate? The
Yeah.
R&D and commercialization, there's obviously only a certain amount of runway of cash to do these things as well. And
That's right.
unfortunately, as we've seen in Australia too, defence innovation hasn't been very innovative in the way that they've conducted themselves to support businesses and products. It's overwhelmingly underwhelming in my opinion. But where you look at the US and other countries, they're right behind innovation, and they've got that long patient lens that they're looking through to, whereas we're sort of only thinking about 3 and 4 year election cycles. But that's my little ramble.
No, I totally agree with you.